Hi there, everybody. Well, I'm going to try and go through a few things that I picked out of the event last night and see if we can get through this in the drive without repeating things that I've seen other places, because there's a lot of chatter, obviously, about the Robotaxi event last night. First of all, are we going to call it a Robotaxi or are we going to call it a Cybercab? Because I'm not entirely clear which terminology is favored. I saw both used kind of interchangeably. And then Elon was talking about the Robovan as opposed to the Robovan, which I thought was kind of a funny, but that he was mispronouncing it intentionally to kind of make it its own new word. But also, Robovan sounds like something I should ask my doctor about getting a prescription for. I don't know exactly what that would. The light is green. You can go when the light's green. Anyway, this is just to show you this is a real drive. The Robovan sounds like something you have to ask your doctor for a prescription. I'm not sure exactly what it would cure, but maybe it would be a fear of germs in confined spaces, because while they did show the robot that cleans the Cybercab, they did not really show how they clean the van, and I gotta think that van's going to have some interesting things happening in it that, yeah, we're gonna want that clean. We want that clean pretty good. My first impression was, I know that they were late because there's a medical emergency. This is why I didn't stay up to watch it. It's always disappointing that they can't keep to timelines, even for their own events that are on closed studio lots and are 2 months later than planned. And you still can't start on time, but it was a medical issue with somebody in the crowd, and apparently that's the delay. And that's not just a claim from Elon. There was photographs of an ambulance on site, so that's fine. We'll let it go. But given that this event was 2 months later than it was originally planned, I think that there are some pretty high expectations that there was going to be a fairly polished presentation. And the rumors had been that Tesla had been working on this entire area for like 3 months to get it ready for the actual event, which sort of begs the question of, what were they doing all that time? Because it's already a closed set, right? Like they didn't have to build the buildings or anything like that. And I saw that they had stop signs and things set up with like bags of sand holding them in place. So those obviously aren't part of the actual set, probably so they can change it for like, the signage to look like different places, different countries. But still, that's not a 3-month job. So I'm not entirely sure what was going on there. I gotta think that there's some weirdness. Speaking of weirdness, let's just talk about this right away. I've never liked that Tesla does this whole like perceived gas savings when they do their car prices, because I think it's misleading. They were doing the same sort of tricks last night with Optimus, the robot, the humanoid robot. Very clearly, that is not the robot talking. That's somebody talking behind the scenes through a speaker in the robot. This is the same sort of thing that Disney has been doing for a very long time, having somebody out there in a costume, but kind of being handled by a voice actor somewhere else. The most impressive example I remember is the computer animation they use for Crush at Epcot, the Finding Nemo turtle character. The Optimus itself, the motions, I will say, are extremely fluid, and they accelerate and they slow down when approaching objects and picking things up and putting them down, and that's actually really impressive. And I think that probably is not being mentioned enough, is that the motions are extremely fluid, and if they can do that by the robot doing it itself, then the real question becomes how much, I know we have a lot of medical robots now that they use for surgeries and stuff, but how does that compare price-wise to having Optimus mimic? And mimic is the key word, because none of those robots were actually working off any kind of AI. They've shown videos of how they train the robot, and they put it in like a mimic mode, and somebody, they do this and the robot does the same motion. So given the bartender, the bartending robot, the way it interacts with people, the rock, paper, scissors, and all these kind of things, and the fact that the voices were not coming from any kind of program because they had some weird errors in the things they said and the way they said them, like grammatical errors and things like this. Clearly just a person talking. I have to say that the fact that it was not disclosed that these robots were in mimic mode and that there was somebody, out of view who was basically providing all of the movement and all of the speech for the robot was incredibly disingenuous, that it was not said that's explicitly that was what was happening. Because I think if they would have said, look, we're going to demonstrate to you how these robots could be when under their own control, but instead we're going to do it by showing you with them being in mimic mode, that would have been far less misleading. And I don't know, I don't like when a product presentation is just so overtly on the edge of kind of fraudulent. It's just be upfront about that stuff. The more you try to hide it, or the more that you pretend that it's real, the more unfortunate and the outcome's going to be. Anyway, that's a little tangent. So the presentation itself, it should have been a lot more polished. I mean, they had months to work on this, including 2 extra months to work on this from the time he first announced it, like way early in the year, and then the additional 2 months that they gave themselves. Why can't Elon follow his own teleprompter? It's the most infuriating thing, as anybody who has ever seen an actual sales presentation, or I don't know, any product presentation of any kind. You have a prompter there, read the prompter. And he tries to get cute with the crowd, and it's like, it may play off great in person, because the fans in the crowd were sure cheering on and super jazzed about. It was like a weird laugh track. It didn't really line up with what we were seeing a lot of the time. So sort of like, I'm not sure what they're reacting to, because we can't see whatever it is that's going on that they're so excited about. But more to the point of, like, if your goal is actual like product debut and explanation, one of the biggest questions about the Cybercab was how it would function in a fleet environment where it's not being managed by an individual owner, but it's kind of tending to itself, so to speak, which is critical for this to actually work. And there was a video that played very briefly that showed how the Cybercab would be cleaned and how it would be, I think, charged, but it didn't really show, and it kind of maintained, like, wiping off the screens and things like that. But because Elon couldn't be bothered to follow his own teleprompter, presumably a script that he wrote or had some kind of oversight on, by the time he got to it, they kind of cut into it and cut out of it real fast, and we never really got an explanation for what it was that we were supposed to be seeing that would have answered some of the very fundamental practical and logistical considerations of having a robot taxi fleet. So that's a big fail. And so on the one hand, it was like, oh, here's the old Elon. He's not jumping around like a crazy person, pumping up a politician, but he's just doing his usual awkward, can't follow the script presentation. So in a sense, it was a little bit of nostalgia there, but on the other hand, it's sort of like, just do your job, man. Just read what's on the prompter. Tell the people the information. So we still don't really know any details about this. At some point, he was reacting to crowd questions. I think one of them was related to whether or not a certain version of the car would be able to run this software. And he kind of laughed, and he said, well, let's not get into nuance. And that has since been discussed quite a bit, and I think that probably is what led to the statement of all of our current cars can run this software, which means, of course, hardware 3 and older will not be able to do it. So, I would say you heard it here first, but no, you heard it last night. If you listen to what he said and the way he hedged based on the questions that he got, if you don't have hardware 4 or newer, then you're no better off than this car, which won't drive itself either, which is why I like it. So anyway, so there's that. The taxi itself, they talk about people might want to buy it for their own use. That's going to be $30,000, but last time I checked, you're only a couple $1,000s away from an entry-level Model 3, which is a vastly superior thing to own in every respect than the Cybercab is. I mean, you've got an extra set of doors, you've got actually the ability to run it yourself because you have manual controls available to you. You have the frunk, which we didn't see any indication of a frunk on the Cybercab, and it's obviously it's intended to be owned, meaning that you can wrap it and you can do those kinds of things. So I don't understand why anybody would buy a Cybercab when a current Model 3 right now is a minimal upcharge over that. And frankly, a very lightly used Model Y is probably the best value of them all. I mean, value of it all. I mean, they've sold so many Model Ys; they're everywhere. So why would you buy a new, whatever that Honda CRX looking thing was that they had, when you could get a full-on Model Y? It doesn't make it, especially if you got one that had hardware 4 better, which they do now, presumably. And so you're still getting all the functionality of having your own Cybercab you can allegedly send out to let strangers trash it or whatever they're going to do. But also you would have that vehicle for your own personal use. Like I don't quite understand what the point of buying that as a personal vehicle would be. The van, well, we already discussed the van. I think they're going to have to do some pretty significant reality testing with that. I don't know how that goes through snow. The ground clearance doesn't seem to be very much, and even if the wheelbase and things like that, which we didn't really see because it's all hidden under this rubber skirting, as best I can tell, I just have some real questions about that actually going to be able to navigate as a functional vehicle in a 3-dimensional world that has speed bumps and snow drifts that you that you get that in the middle of the road, or middle of the lane, snow pile up and things like that. So that's a big question to me. But probably the biggest takeaway I had as a car person, I'm not into the idea of having a fleet of Cybercabs, or I'm not into full self-driving either. If we're really going to get into that level of detail, then the question becomes whether or not Tesla has products going forward. And best I can tell, no, they don't. And that's somewhat alarming, I think, when you think about it. The Semi isn't in full production. The Cybertruck's not in full production. The S and the X are sort of withering on the vine. They've just updated the Model 3. The Model Y update is coming soon. So what's the next product? If it is just the Cybercab, which I don't think anybody buys, because why wouldn't you just get a Model 3? That's not a product. That's not a... Where are we going? I mean, it takes years to get the factories up and running. Any factory. It takes quite a bit of time to get something designed and into a factory and then built at scale of any kind. They've got all these factories all over the world building Model Ys. They're just now going to get them doing the refresh ones, presumably. But there's no pipeline. There's no pipeline for vehicular products. And I get the whole thing of Tesla's more than a car company. Well, all right, you can say that, but right now they make most of their money selling cars. So you got to have cars. You got to have cars. And it's kind of strange to me that they haven't done some of the really obvious things. A delivery van, make a commuter car, make a little hatchback, you sell that in Europe. I don't know, everybody else who sells electric cars in Europe seems to have a 3 or 5 door hatchback that they're selling over there, and they're all great. But if Tesla is so efficient, so good with their motors and their production and their design processes and all that, then taking on a Renault 5 or taking on the new electric Mini or the electric Twingo that's coming, or any of these things should be a piece of cake and really easy money for Tesla. So, but they have a factory there too. So They should be doing that. Delivery vans, a smaller delivery van, if you don't want to go head to head with Rivian, something that's more along the inner city sort of delivery vans that they have overseas. I don't know. I came away from that last night with the same questions I've had before, which is basically, where is this company going, and how does it stay viable? And I don't know. A lot of questions. Anyway, so that's my quick takeaways of Elon and some of the things that I saw last night. Thanks for watching.